Hey guys, it's Pastor Scott.
And his wife, Mac Huntley.
And after months of prayer, God is now finally bringing us to a new location. And come July 12th at 11 a.m., we are going into the Centennial Hills Library. So we want to invite you to Navigation Church starting July 12th at 11 a.m. to come make a difference for God and a difference in our community. We hope to see you there. A series called Analog Life, and the whole thing is we explore how we can follow Jesus faithfully in a world that is full of noise and distraction and digital connections. And so last week we looked at the story of Mary and Martha and the dangers of distraction, because Martha was very distracted and Mary was very honed in. And also that I think that one of the greatest threats to our spiritual lives is distraction, and not because it's necessarily inherently evil, but simply because it's endless. And like I always said, is that if you want to fill up 25 hours of your day or 100 hours of your day, you absolutely can now. And we have plenty of things that would love to do that for you. And that's the issue, is that when we fill up all of our time, it's hard to put Jesus back in. So there's a term that gets thrown around college. I don't know if you've heard of it, and it's called the freshman 15. I don't know if you know about that, but has anyone ever heard of it? Okay, awesome. So people older. So the idea is that as you go to when you go to college, your freshman year, you're going to put on like 15 pounds. So it's a lot of weight. Like people go to college and they just put on a ton of weight. And for those of you who've been to college, I don't know if you saw that. For those of you who've been to college, I don't know if that was you. But having gone to the Air Force Academy, we did not have people gain a lot of weight their freshman year. In fact, we had a lot of people lose weight out of the stress and exercise. So like, we're not a really good place to do that. But I did find, as I was preparing this message, I came across a meta-analysis study. So it's from the National Library of Medicine, and it examined 22 studies with 5,500 college students ranging from 1980 all the way to 2014. And they found that 60.9%, so 60% of people gained an average of 7.5 pounds their freshman year. So I don't know if it's late puberty, but yes, so it at least has some weight, but maybe not as much. Take that what you will. I've always thought that the one issue with science, especially on participation, is you actually have to participate. So all the people that are staying in their room eating terrible food and gaining all the weight probably didn't participate in the study. So, but what I found interesting was not the weight gain. Okay, I don't necessarily mind a whole lot of weight gain. What I found was what the study cited was the reason for the weight gain. Because what they said is that students developed irregular eating habits, exercised less, stayed up later, and abandoned many of the routines that they had previously provided structure to their lives. Which, of course, if you've ever been to college and seen freshmen, that checks, because you get to college and what do? You just do whatever you want, right? And so it shouldn't shock anyone that people kind of lose the habits that they've done. And I know that especially because, at least for my kids, if you probably ask them, the people who create structure and motivation and force in their life would be me and Mac, making them eat healthy, not stay up late, and all of that. And when we're gone, well, I dare to see what's going to happen to my kids. But it's interesting what happens to people who have structure and then overnight lose it. It's kind of interesting because when no one tells you what to eat and where to go, and especially all those 8 a.m. classes, I didn't have it up, but I actually saw a professor that said, I'm systematically keeping grandparents alive, because when I had an 8 a.m. class, the amount of people who said they couldn't make it because a grandparent died was astronomical, and when I moved my class to 1 p.m., no more grandparents died. Interesting. But it says something about human nature. That's what I love looking about, because it exposes, the study I think exposes human nature, and that is that the freedom to do whatever you want doesn't always produce healthy results, or even better outcomes. And yet, how many times have we, kind of as students, as adults, thought if we just had more freedom to do whatever we want, then, if we could just get every restriction to disappear, every boundary, then our lives would just naturally be better, right? Like all those stresses would just go. But I believe it's not just college. Like, college is one thing, but it's in our culture today, like heavy emphasis. Because the way our culture defines freedom, I believe, is just the ability to do whatever you want, however you want, whenever you want. That's freedom, right? But what I noticed is that the Bible does not define freedom that way. And in fact, the Apostle Paul presents a completely different understanding of what freedom is. Because it's not the absence of restraint. People always think freedom is the absence of restraint, or the ability to follow, your every impulse and desire. That freedom is being able to choose to live under the authorship of Christ, and to live and follow him, and that is going to improve your life. So if you have your Bibles, please turn to Galatians chapter 5. It's actually kind of further in the New Testament. It's a little bit past halfway of Galatians. No, we don't necessarily go to a lot of that, but we're going to start out in chapter 5, and we'll be looking at verses 13 through 18, where we discover kind of a little bit about what Christian freedom is and how the world's idea of freedom is very different. So, and the words will be up on the screen as they are. So we start out in verse 13. It says, "You, my brothers and sisters, were called to be free, but do not use your freedom to indulge the flesh. Rather, serve one another humbly in love, for the entire law is fulfilled in keeping this one commandment." Awesome. "Love your neighbor as yourself. If you bite and devour each other, watch out, or you will be destroyed by each other. So I say, walk by the Spirit, and you will not gratify the desires of the flesh. For the flesh desires what is contrary to the Spirit, and the Spirit what is contrary to flesh, and they are in conflict with each other, so that you are not to do whatever you want, but you are led by the Spirit. You are not under the law." Awesome. I always like it when people are just like, "I need the Bible's too long, did not read." Okay, love your neighbor as yourself. Now go. And it's like, awesome, thank you for boiling it down. And then I found out maybe we needed a little bit of extra steps along the way. Because I found out that even Christians seem to have a very difficult time loving their neighbor without a little slight explanation of that. But if you see, one of the things that come in over and over again is actually this idea of freedom. Because I don't think that a lot of people know historically the struggle that people dealt with freedom, because a lot of people were under the rule of a lot of different people. But what's getting forgotten in our world today, because of this freedom, because of this idea of freedom, is my first point, and that is this, is that freedom without boundaries leads to bondage. It does. It really does. Because when Paul begins this passage, he says something that I believe every Christian loves to hear, right? You're free. Like, you're called to be free. Who doesn't like to be free? Love freedom. And what I'd also say is some of your Bibles, depending on the translation, might say brothers. I just want you to know that the Greek word is brothers and sisters. It's kind of like all of the church for the congregation. So ladies, you're called to be free too, and this applies to you as well. Just want you to know that. But we even celebrate, how much do we love freedom? We celebrate, we're about to celebrate July 4th, right? We're about to actually literally shoot off fireworks and spend a ton of money to tell the British we're happy you're no longer over us. Every year we get to tell Britain how happy we are that we're not them. And why not? Because their food stinks, okay? Yes, they took over the whole world and they still have terrible food. How did we miss that, okay? Which, if you ever wanted to know, they actually did a study a poll as to what the best English food, they told Britain, what is your favorite food? And the number one food was curry. And so it's loving that an Indian dish was the most favorite dish and had nothing to do with necessary British food. So take that with what there you go. But the way, like I said, the way most people talk about freedom today is simply, I can do what I want. And I don't know, I heard this phrase a lot of time growing up. Please tell me if you do. Where a kid instinctively says, it's a free country, I can do what I want. I heard that. I don't know if you've said that before, it's a free country. But what's also funny is the kid, I heard this from a friend that lived on my street, and the sad part is that the kid who also said it's a free country, I do what I want, also said, my father's a lawyer and I'll sue you. And I found that very very weird that the same kid thought he could do what he wants, but if I did what he didn't like, he'd get his father to sue me. Thankfully, it never happened. Maybe I even stumbled upon this one time in my feed. I'll bring it up. There you go. So it turns out as an adult, you can eat chocolate cake for breakfast if you want. There's literally no one policing this. I want you to know, this is true, by the way. No one is going to police chocolate cake. She has a point, and I know that that's a girl because I don't know what guy would do this, okay? But what I found is you're right. No one is policing this. And I found that when I was growing up, I eventually would go on to Halloween, on Halloween, get all my candy, and my parents, because they're horrible people, wouldn't let me eat all of it the day after. And so I then said, when I'm an adult, I'm going to eat all the candy I want. And I'm here to tell you, kid Scott would be very disappointed in adult Scott. He has not eaten as much candy as I promised my parents I would eat, okay? But what I find is that, chocolate cake and candy aside, right? What I find is hidden in the statement, I can do whatever I want, is actually a secondary assumption that is not true. And that is, I can do whatever I want and there won't be consequences. That's really what I think they say is, I can do whatever I want and there won't be any consequences. And let me tell you, that is not true. Because here it is, freedom does not eliminate consequences. You are free to do whatever you want. You are free to act in a certain way, but you are not free if it breaks the law to not go to jail. I one time heard this very popular quote that they said, you are free from reality, but you're not free from the consequences of being free from reality. So that's why I think that Paul immediately follows it up with what? Do not use your freedom to indulge in the flesh. I don't know if, again, for some of you who are online, there's a popular gentleman who kind of has made waves in the last few years. His name is Jocko Willink. I think we have a picture. There you go. That's Jocko, okay? He's a jacked dude. Yeah, you should know him. He was a Navy SEAL. He was a former Navy SEAL. He has a book called Extreme Ownership. And he's a highly decorated, his books have sold millions. And the reason why he's gotten popular is because, one, is he looks really mean, okay? And this guy is really serious about what he does. But here's one of the quotes that he said that I kind of like. And he said this, discipline equals freedom. Discipline equals freedom. I believe that many people actually believe the opposite, right? Freedom means fewer rules, fewer restrictions, fewer boundaries. However, Jocko argues, no, that's not freedom. You need discipline, that if you want financial freedom in your life, you actually need financial discipline. And I know this because people who have no financial discipline have no money. They have no freedom. And for people who have, if you want physical freedom, right? You want to be physically free, you have to discipline yourself and go to the gym. So here's my question for you. How do you get spiritual freedom then? If that's the case, that you need spiritual discipline. And yet, the more I think about it, I realize that Paul and Jocko are really saying the same thing, right? Is that nearly 2,000 years before Jocko wrote his book and made millions, maybe that's where Paul went wrong. He never got millions off of his letters, capitalism, right? But you see that I think we've all been there to believe that freedom just means I get to scroll endlessly, right? That's what I have freedom to do. And then you find out that you have no time for anything else. But here's what I want to show you. In a few verses later, in Galatians 5:17, this is what he says. He says, for the flesh desires what is contrary to the spirit, and the spirit what is contrary to the flesh. And look, they're in conflict with one another. I do believe this is that is a very true statement because many people don't wake up and then say, I'm just going to scroll for 3 hours. I know it happens. Here's the thing. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. And I hope, however, that most people are not for the next 3 hours I'm going to scroll. But we learned last week with the difficulty of technology. For those of you who weren't there was actually a study that showed that Gen Z spends 9 hours, close to 9 hours a day on phones that have nothing to do with the job. So it's like someone's scrolling for 3 hours. It's just hopefully not me. But if we don't place boundaries on our digital life, what I think is that we'll find that the technology that was designed to make our life easier is going to make it a lot harder. So, in a world of finite time, how do we deal with infinite, endless content? And I think it's about what we give our time to. It's like, there's great content, but it's about what we give our time to. And here's my second point. What captures our attention eventually shapes our hearts. Paul says that the flesh and the spirit are in conflict. But notice how he doesn't say the devil and the spirit are in conflict. Though they are, but he doesn't say that. Because I believe that spiritual warfare is real. If you want to talk about it, we can go into it, okay? But I actually believe as real as spiritual warfare is, most of the battles we face have nothing to do with the devil. They have nothing to do with demons. They actually have to do with ourselves making really bad choices for ourselves. So, but I have a question for you. Have you ever talked to a Christian that, like, any temptation in their life, they just credit to demons or Satan? Like, Satan's on me, man. It's here. And if you haven't, allow me to show you what that looks like.
There's a lady in our neighborhood named Aunt Phyllis, and she's very, she's not our aunt, but she's like kind of she's like, John, it's spiritual warfare. I was like, I don't think it is, Aunt Phyllis. She's like, John, the devil is attacking me. I go, I don't think he cares that much. I was like, what's going on? She's like, I was driving home, and I'm trying to be on a diet. God told me to be on a diet, take care of my body, and the Krispy Kreme light was just flashing. It's the devil. I go, I don't think. Probably wasn't. I was like, God is omnipresent. He can be anywhere. The devil has to pick and choose the battles he's trying to fight. And you're saying greed, corporate wars, crime, politics, fraud, natural disasters, and the devil's like, not yet.
That's, like I said, I'm not saying you're not under spiritual attack, but if it's about a Krispy Kreme diet, maybe it's not the devil. Just throwing that out there, right? But I will say, I actually wish I could blame my problems on Satan, right? Wouldn't it be easy to be like, it's what's external. It's all external. And my mom had this very popular phrase, thankfully it's gone out of the Christian vernacular, but it's like, we're going to pray for a hedge of protection. It actually comes from Job. And my mom was always like, just pray for a hedge of protection. And I started to realize, like, it was very easy because it's like, we can get God to just get rid of all the external pressures. But can I tell you that the hedge of protection for all your external problems will not fix all your internal problems? It will not, like a hedge protects from external things. It does not protect internally. You got to deal with that yourself. And I think that a lot of people, sadly, would love it if we could blame all of our problems on something called not us. In fact, I don't even care what you blame it on. As long as it's not me, I'm happy with it. So I think that's why this matters so much, because we are creatures of habit. We're creatures of habit. There's a big book called Atomic Habits. It's massively popular, but the idea is your habits shape you. Simple enough. And we tend to think of the same thoughts. We repeat the same patterns day by day. Yeah, you want to know how hard a habit is? Try getting one. Try getting a new one. You'll see how hard a habit is. But what happens, but here's my question. What happens when technology enters the conversation? Because we used to think it's neutral, right? But now it's a primary tool on everything in our lives. So here's my question to you. What happens when creators use those tools who have the one sole thing in mind, which is to get you addicted to their product? How do we deal with that? Because one of the things that fascinates me, and if you don't know this, social media platform executives will not let their children on their platforms. Steve Jobs, I have this quote for you. Steve Jobs, who made the iPad, the iPhone, when it came out, when the iPad came out, millions of people bought it, and a reporter asked Steve Jobs what his kids thought about his product, and here's what he said. They haven't used it. We limit how much technology our kids use at home. Let me tell you, if Steve Jobs doesn't have his kids use his own product, that gets me to question. Because if you found a pastor who runs a church and they're like, oh man, what do your kids think about it? And they're like, oh, my kids don't go to my church. I'd be like, why not? Well, I'd ask a lot more questions. And yet, I find that happens with our social media technology all the time. So, years ago, Mark Zuckerberg actually took a photo of himself because Instagram was celebrating 500 million users. Good on Instagram, right? Here's the picture that got taken. Instagram. And people were actually quick to see, you might not be able to see the back, but quick to see that right there is tape over his camera. So this is his iPad, and there's tape over his camera. And people are like, hey Mark, why do you have tape over your camera? It wouldn't be because you could remotely turn that on, could you? I mean, like, you assured us that your products would never invade in our lives. And Mark had nothing to say about it. Kind of interesting. Because I think the answer is actually simple, is that the people who own these things actually know how powerful they are, and they understand that your attention is valuable. And whether Mark Zuckerberg or Jeff Bezos, whether they phrase it the same way as Paul, here's what they all understood, is that your attention determines your direction. That's easy, right? Tell me where you spend most of your attention. I can actually tell you where you're going to end up. Now, I actually will say this, okay, I want to make it clear. I don't think getting rid of all technology is bad, because I don't want our church to look like this next week. Okay, that's not what I want our church to look like. Okay, they can have their own, I don't want to see anyone pulling up with a horse and buggy in front. I don't think that the HOA would allow it anyway. Okay, I don't need that. But that's not really what I want. I don't want. But what does Paul say is the enemy? Is the flesh. So I think that why are we surprised when if all we do is feed things of the flesh, that it grows stronger? Because whatever you feed goes stronger. If you feed your body, you're going to go stronger. If you feed your physical, you're going to go stronger. If you feed mental, have you ever seen, a lot of studies are coming out where they say people with dementia and Alzheimer's, they say if you engage your brain, you can actually fix that. You can grow your brain a little stronger and kind of stave that off. So why don't we do that? So why don't we believe that with spirituality as well? So the Apostle Paul, thankfully, I will say, he didn't live in the technology of our day, but here's something that he did learn. That he didn't have technology, don't know what his ideas on social media are, but he was really understanding of the culture. Because culture in the Apostle Paul time did impact everything you did. It determined what you were, how you were, your status, what you were supposed to do, what you were supposed to say. He understood that implicitly. And it leads to my final point, and that is we belong to Christ, not to the culture that consumes us. One of the main reasons why I think that this battle between flesh and spirit can never go away is this. This is why I think it can never go away. Because God designed human beings to be dependent. And that is very unpopular, and no one wants to admit that, because when we start to become dependent on evil, selfish things, we get abused, we get used, and we get thrown away. And if we admit, wow, God might have had a hand in that, now all of a sudden, God's the problem. Let me tell you, God designed us to be dependent on one thing and one thing only, and that is Him. That's why He created us. That's the problem that I think with design, is like when you have money, you can spend it on bad things, you can spend it on good things. I encourage you to spend it on good things. That's the problem with choice. And what I find is that if you will depend on God or something else. A lot of people, here's what I say, is everyone loves binary decisions like either or. What I've always said is we have this huge push for independence, right? Massive, I'm independent. I don't need anyone to tell me what to do. I'm a strong, independent woman who don't need no man, right? But we are dependent. Men are dependent, women are dependent, because God created us both to depend on Him. And if you don't realize that, and here's why I want to live us the truth in love, is that it doesn't help us to ignore that fact simply because there are evil people who use that fact to do evil things. Is that being blind of that fact does not make Christianity better. It actually makes us a lot worse. Because as much as our world has said, be independent, I have seen independent people, they're more dependent on everything than they realize. 1 Corinthians 6:19 says this, you're not your own, and you were bought with a price. Therefore, honor God with your body. I think that modern culture hates that verse. I don't think that, where it actually says you're paid with a price, so actually do something about it. Because what does our modern culture at least say? It's your body, your truth, your body, your rules. It's all about you. And we saw where that happened. But I actually have a question. Have you ever stopped to ask yourself this? Why is your attention so important? I mean, there are companies that spend billions, with a B, billions of dollars to get your attention. I mean, if someone's spending billions of dollars on me, I must be important. I wish my kids kind of understood that they are important, that's why I spend a lot of money on them. But have you ever stopped to ask why there are literal people who've dedicated their life to getting your attention? Is that some of the world's smartest people get hired by Google and Meta, and all their job is make this product addict people to it more. Let me give you a quote. Former Google designer Tristan Harris, he co-founded the Center of Humane Technology. So he's a former Google designer, and he came and he said this: we tied business success and billions of dollars to the amount that we captured attention. Imagine that. It's like, just make them consume. They're not here to make you a better person, though I think you could find stuff on YouTube. But it's like, they're not like to make people better, just get them to consume the product. Now, and why is that? Because they realize that if they get your attention, they'll get your influence, and if they get your influence, they'll get your money. That's why, okay? I think and what I always find when I say they're just after your money, a lot of people will actually say, well, doesn't the church want my money? Doesn't the church want my money? And I always find that objective very interesting because people rarely ever apply that logic outside of the church. Where I'm like, okay, so Apple doesn't want your money. Oh, but you have an iPhone. I was like, Starbucks doesn't want your money, but you just bought it into church. I was like, so Amazon, like Netflix wants your money. Amazon not only wants your money, it's getting your money, okay? Amazon is getting all of our money, okay? All of it. And so when people are like, it wants my money, my principle is, so does the things that want your money, that they must be bad. So all of the things you give your money to are also bad. And the idea is, well, no. I actually like my iPhone. I like Amazon, and believe me, I like Amazon a lot. So same day shipping, am I right? So here's the thing that I always say. So your principle is not they want your money. The principle is you find that you get something of benefit from them. So you don't give a rip about money. You just want a product or a service for your money. So if the church actually gave you a product that was worth your money, would you do it? But of course, it's double standard, right? How many atheists condemn Christianity, saying that that people use God to manipulate people's emotions in order to make themselves rich and powerful? Especially prosperity gospel, Joel Osteen, all of that stuff. Here's my thing. Fair enough. So is the principle that people who manipulate your emotions to get rich and powerful, that they're inherently part of corrupt systems? Because I would hate to apply that logic to anyone in government. For a government official who uses your emotions to manipulate you to vote for them and then get into and rich and powerful, to say that system must be inherently corrupt. But here's the thing. I'm not saying greed is okay, and I'm not saying manipulating your emotions are okay. What I am saying is, why do people apply certain logic to the church and never outside the church? And the idea is because there is a conflict between the flesh and the spirit. The spirit is in here and the flesh is out there. That's why there's a double standard. Because I get what I want, because here's the idea with the flesh. The flesh says, you don't have to do anything except give me your money. You don't have to do anything except do what I say. And the spirit actually says you have to try. Let me tell you, that's a losing strategy sometimes. That's a losing strategy. So here's what I'd say is, our culture has a bargain. I made this meme for you. You're welcome. Okay? And here's what I think they have. I receive, this is culture. I receive all your money and your attention, and here's what I'll get back. Endless entertainment, convenience, distraction, and comfort. Pretty good deal, actually, all things considered. It might be a really bad deal. The church, sadly, here's what I say. The church only offers one endless thing, and that's eternal life. That's all we offer, is eternal life. And by the number of people that are going to church today, I hate to say it doesn't seem like a really good deal for at least some people. At least from the get-go. I wish that church could be flashier. And by the way, I try and make you laugh. I try and get you engaged. I try and do all of that because I want the church to be flashier and not just boring. But let me tell you, it's really hard because we're in conflict. Because I will be straight up honest. Jesus, the idea that you can work your whole life and all you get is eternal life for some people is like, yeah, but I could have everything I want right now. It's hard. So, as we close, I just want to give you these 3 questions. Number 1, where do you need stronger boundaries in your life so that freedom does not become bondage? I ask, it is a wonderful gift. Self-control, I don't know if you know, self-control is actually one of the spiritual gifts. It kind of gets pastors don't really talk about it a lot. It's love, joy, peace, patience. We love all those, and self-control is we'll put self-control on the back burner. But what boundaries is God calling you to establish so you can remain safe from being controlled by technology? Here's the second one. What is receiving your attention right now? And how is it shaping your relationship with God? Right, it's actually an open-ended question. It's not like I'm just asking, what is receiving your attention right now? And hopefully not now. I know you're all in church. Thank you. Awesome. Hopefully that is shaping your relationship with God. Thank you. What I found is it increasing your faith at all? What you spend time? When my son comes into my study and then asks me, can I have more time? He strengthens my relationship with Christ all the time because I have to ask God, please give me patience. Okay? So he strengthens my relationship all the time with Jesus. Okay? Okay, thank you, son. And then here's the last one. If I looked at your life, if someone looked at your life, what would they say is leading your life? If they observed your habits and schedules and who you spend time with and just where you spend your time, what would they conclude? Again, good, bad, or otherwise. This isn't condemning, it's just kind of asking, because here's what I would say, and I want to end with this. If you're not very much. If you're saying, Scott, I need an accountability partner. Scott, I need some help. Scott, I need to go with someone. Okay, talk to me. I would love to do that because I'm not here to say oh man, you have to take care of it yourself. It's always been, we can help you if you need. And that's what I want to do, is that I'm not here to judge. I left judgment long ago when I saw just broken person after broken person, and I think that's what Jesus did, is that he just realized people don't need judgment, they need love. They need love. So, I just want to put our attention where it matters. Let's pray.